What is the big, ugly, dirty secret about business nobody talks about and nobody wants to know about and is going to blow your mind? Stay tuned. Welcome, everybody. I'm Scott Patton, and he is...
I'm Chaffee-Thanh.
All right, so we're just going to dive right into it. We're going to dive right into it, Chaffee. The big secret that nobody wants to talk about, and you cannot be successful in business, is it's a really dirty word, and it's called relationships. Ooh. Business is fundamentally all about relationships. Typically, people will say, hey, people in general want to deal with people that they know, they like, and they trust. That happens all the time. But they don't talk about the other side of the story or the coin, which is, what if you don't like the person, you don't trust the person, and you're stuck with the person? And that, of course, is what we're going to be talking about today, because it's right in my face. We're dealing with it like live and in color. So, Chaffee,
oh no,
we've been fortunate enough with a number of the people that we work with that we love them. They love us, and it's great. But what do you do if you're the checkout person at the grocery store and the person buying the groceries is a jerk? What do you do if you're working in an organization and your coworker is a jerk? What do you do when you're in these situations where you can't get out of them in the moment, right? Because you can always quit and get another job. But you're with people that they lie, or they cheat, or they steal, or they do things that are fine, but they trigger that individual and they don't like it, or they gossip, or these sort of things. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today, because I think it is something that people don't talk about. Like, how do you turn toxic relationships into good? And I mean, in the personal development relationship, romantic relationship world, that gets talked about a lot, because people are in toxic families, or their parents aren't nice to them, or their kids aren't nice to them, or they're not nice to their kids, or Auntie Susie did something 25 years ago that I'm still mad at her about. And sometimes people don't forgive. So now I'm going to be quiet and let you take center stage.
Well, before I take center stage, Scott, I got to ask you, did I do something to you?
It's you.
Is it
it's your
me?
fault.
Is that why we're talking about
life is so bad in Hawaii?
All right.
And it's funny you say that, because that is also my reaction when somebody is upset about something and then maybe they aren't clear about the specifics of it. My very, very first thought is, what did I do? Right? And so that's a really, your first reaction is also my first reaction. And I've learned to calm that voice down and say, let's listen to the person. Let's find out what's going on with them. And 90% of the time, it has nothing to do with me, but I happen to be the person there, right?
So this goes into something that we've talked about previously, Scott, which is emotional intelligence, right? And emotional intelligence is a skill set that I know a lot of people aren't aware about. It's a study that has, I guess, formulated, in more recent times, shall we say, or been defined in more recent times. And it's really understanding the relationships between yourself, as well as yourself to others, right? And so it's understanding and recognizing these relationships. And so the first step in all of this, Scott, is just as you said, is recognizing that there's something going on, because a lot of people are completely oblivious to what's happening around them, and they just act the way they act without any kind of recognition to anybody else. And sometimes it's just the other person acting that way towards you, and you didn't do anything, and you don't know about it. I in one of my earlier relationships in college, I was going out with somebody, and she would get upset with me about certain things that I had no clue why she was upset with me. And so, and I would, so this is not what not to do, right? So if you're upset with somebody or somebody's upset with you, and they don't tell you why they're upset with you, there's nothing you can do about that at that point in time, right? So not communicating is not the right thing to do, first and foremost, right?
Right.
So I would ask, why upset? And like, I would just get an angry face. And, it's something that I did.
You
And
should
I had
know.
no idea.
You should know.
That's the thing. You should know. And maybe I should have. Right. And so awareness and recognizing the situation is the first thing. Because if you don't recognize your emotions, you don't recognize other individuals' emotions, then there's no way you can deal with what's going on and what's happening. So,
Chaffee, you remind me of when I was about 15 years old, living at my parents' place. I was in the basement. They all lived upstairs. So I came up one Sunday morning. I walked into the living room. My dad is in his chair reading a book. My mom is in the couch reading a book. I waltz in. I'm happy as can be. It's sunny day. It's summer. I go, hi. And I just zip right out into the kitchen and make myself breakfast. And then 20 minutes later, my sister comes downstairs, walks into the living room, goes, hello, and goes, oh. And for her, it was like she hit an ice wall. It was a freezer in there. Unbeknownst to me, my parents were furious at each other. And my sister, she picked it up like instantaneously. And she never said anything about it for 40 years.
wow.
And we were walking down the harbor, this path by the harbor of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and she accuses me of almost destroying my parents' marriage. And I said, what are you talking about? Well, don't you remember? And I go, I have no clue what you're talking about. Well, and then she just said what I said. And she said, and I was sure, and I've been convinced that it was something you did that made them so mad. So, of course, Mom and Dad are right there. So I turn to Mom and I say, Mom, do you remember this? Oh, your dad and I, we were always mad at each other. Well, do you remember this specific time? No, I don't remember this at all.
That's funny.
It was really funny. So we carry things around that are not true, at least from my mom and my perspective. I guess from my sisters, it's still true, for decades. And let's let them fester, right?
Yeah. So I've moved. So I hope that cleared everything up with your family, Scott. So let's just say that, right?
My sister has forgiven me for being a family breaker, a marriage breaker.
Good. So, well, considering everyone's still together, you're okay.
That's right.
With that said, I often say this, and I often tell a lot of people this, that get into business with partners, which is my best businesses ever, hands down, have been with partners. My most successful businesses, the most money I've ever made, have been with partners. And the worst businesses I've ever had, the ones that have fell apart and I lost the most money with, have been with partners. Right? And so working with a partner can be a double-edged sword. And so you want to make sure that you understand the relationship that you have with them. And unfortunately, life happens, and sometimes relationships change. And if you're not able to change with that, or make changes to deal with those changes, then a good relationship can become bad, right? And so it goes back to what you said, Scott, is how do we deal with that? How do we handle those situations? And as I said, first and foremost is recognition, right? And then
that's
I think
self-awareness in the emotional intelligence. It's self-awareness.
Absolutely. And then secondly, it's communication, right? You have to have a constant stream of open communication with that individual. Now, sometimes in the moment, that individual that might be mad at you for some unknown reason is not in the mood to communicate, right? They're not
Or
in a,
to listen. I mean, there's two parts. There's what you're putting out, it's what they're taking in, and then it's your interpretation of what you're saying and their interpretation of what they're hearing. And
correct.
they can be, and unfortunately or fortunately, 90 some percent of our communication is all tonal expressions and all that sort of stuff. So you could be saying, Chaffee, I think that you're just like wonderful. Great job. Or you could be saying, hey, Chaffee, you are so cool. You're so wonderful. You've just done an amazing job. And, the words are not that different, but the experience is completely different, right? And we may not be aware of how we're communicating. Like, people can read my face easily, and I can be thinking nasty thoughts, but I'm saying nice things, and they're like, no, that's not true, Scott. You're mad at me. And I go, how do you know? It's right there.
Because you're making hand gestures at me while you're talking. That's right. So for example, in the situation of the checkout individual that's checking somebody out, and they get a client that comes up that you're checking out, and that person is completely angry at you, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, you absolutely don't know why they're angry, and maybe they're not angry because of something you did. They're angry because something happened earlier in the day, and
right.
they're just you're just there. They're taking it out on you, right? And so, what do you do in that situation? How do you handle that situation? And I've often found out is a lot of times really getting angry at another person that's angry at you doesn't help the situation. So we often talk about mirroring.
Right. It might not be a good idea at this time.
That might not be a good idea. What I have found out, though, is Scott, in times where somebody is angry and they're yelling at you, if you agree with them, it a lot of times it diffuses that anger, because if they're yelling at you for some reason and you agree with them, what are they going to yell at you at now?
Right.
Like, you did this, you did this, you did this, and you're okay. You're right. I did. Okay. Now what? Right. It kind of takes the hot air out of it. And so whether it's right or wrong, whether you agree with them or you did something or not, if you agree with them, it gives them pause enough for them to go, okay, now what? And that is an open door for you now to start saying, communicating and figuring out what's actually going on, right?
Yeah, because normally before they've got mad at you, they've had a conversation in their head, and it's gone, I say this, he says this, I say this, he says this, I say this, he says this, he says a really mean thing to me, I get mad, then he gets madder, we get madder, and then by the time you and I are actually talking, I've already had the conversation in my head. I know that you're a jerk and you're going to get mad at me, so I just give you the full blast, and you're like, what happened? And I had that actually happen when I was a manager of a grocery store. My front-end manager called me up and said, we have a customer down here. She's really mad, and she insists on talking to the manager. Can you come down? I said, sure, tell her I'll be right down. I walk down, I see her. She's just got steam coming out of her ears, right? And I thought, oh, I wonder what she's mad about. And so the first thing I did is I get a big smile, and I said, I don't know what the problem is, but I want you to know that I'm going to fix it. And she just went, whew, because she'd gone home. Her groceries she wasn't happy with something. And she had this, I'm going to take it back. They're going to do this. They're going to do this. And she had this whole fight going on in her head by the time she got back to the store. And what it was she had, there was a dent in a can of peas. It was 33 cents. So it's like, oh, that's the problem? No, I just turned to my clerk, go get another one of these right now. Off they went, came back. Here you go, ma'am. She said, oh, thank you. I'm so happy. And spent another $200 on groceries.
You should have given her 2 cans, Scott. Here's one to replace it, and here's one for your trouble.
No, we're cheap in the grocery business.
Only you deflated her anger by helping her, by agreeing with her, by addressing the challenge, versus going, what's so mad? It's only a dent in a can. It's only 33 cents. What are you thinking? You're wasting my time. You're wasting your time. right?
Yeah.
And if you would have gone that and mirrored her anger, it would have gotten her more angry, more upset, and caused a lot more ill will, shall we say.
Yeah. So one of the things you talked about was the self-awareness, like what's going on with me. And then the other part of it, I think that's really important when it comes to emotional intelligence is self-management. Because we have, it's kind of, like they have the little devil on one side and the little angel on the other, and it's blah, 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 blah. And so we have these voices in our heads, and I don't think they're all my voices. I think sometimes they're your voice, because we connect. And well, actually, the reason I say that is everyone that you meet and impresses you, they become part of your mind. Like I've grown because I've known you, Chaffee, right? So there'll be situations where I won't necessarily say what would Chaffee say or do, but my subconscious is, well, this is what Chaffee said about this, so why don't you do that instead of the dumb thing you're thinking of doing? But the other part of it is that we've got these little noises that go, well, that person's at the end, and if we don't manage those voices, like, thank you very much for sharing, but I'm not going to yell at them this time. Okay, go away. And then, but most of us don't. Like, we just blah, and then later, of course, you just are not happy with the blah because, of course, it's blah, and you get the result of blah, and now you've got a bigger problem you have to solve.
So part of that self-management is recognizing triggers. What triggers you, right? What makes you upset? What makes you trigger an emotion in yourself, and recognizing that trigger in you and determining whether that's a valid trigger or not. So if somebody comes up to me yelling at my face, does that trigger, would that trigger me to yell back at their face? Right. And the sooner I can recognize those triggers, the things that set me off, then the faster that I can recognize those and deal with them appropriately. And I'll give you a key example. And I think this is true for pretty much, I think it's pretty much true for anybody that's in a relationship. And
it's not true for me. No,
yeah, that's right.
I know it's not true for me. I don't know what it is you're going to say.
It's true for you. See, I triggered it for you because I told you what's true for you, and it might not be true.
Don't you dare do that. You truthed me.
What I found, though, is that as I was going through my personal development earlier on in my career, I started being able to deal and work with individuals, and when they would bring up challenges and issues, I would be able to address those. I would be able to figure those things out. And when I was working with somebody that was working with me and they brought up something, then I would be able to work through them, train them, educate them on how I like things done instead of the way they did it, and figure those things out. And what I found, though, is that even though I was getting better at dealing with those relationships, I would go back home, and my wife and I, we were working together in our business, we would all of a sudden just start arguing about something, or she wouldn't do something and it would make me upset. Like, why didn't she do that? Or I would do something, it would make her upset. Like, why did I do that? And what I found was that it was because we expected so much more out of each other that these little things that I would just calmly address with somebody else would trigger me if she did it. Like, she better, like, why is she acting that way? Like, or why didn't she do that? Like, she should know better because she's my wife, right? And in reality, she shouldn't. Like, maybe I didn't communicate that properly with her. Maybe, instead of expecting certain things from her and expecting her to know those, I should have communicated better with her on those situations. And so when you're working with a significant other or a family member or somebody close to you, you really have to pay attention because there's a different dynamic there, and your expectations can blow things up. And so make sure you're not setting unreasonable expectations for somebody you're close to just because you're close to them. And I think that's a key factor that everybody needs to be aware of, especially couples working together. And I think we lost Scott. There he is. Scott, you back? I think you were frozen for a second there. Okay, he's still frozen. So while he's frozen, I guess I'll carry on.
I'm back. I'm back.
Oh, there you are.
I am back. I had a little hiccup in my internet. Yeah.
That's all right.
So that's a great point. I'm still frozen. Keep talking.
So one of the biggest challenges that always pop up when I'm talking with business owners and people working is that relationship
It's
with their
Hawaii.
spouse.
Everything is slow here.
That's all right. Enjoy your beach. So relationship, the dynamic between spouses working together or significant others working together, that is a key dynamic that can determine the success and failure of your business. And I do see you moving around, Scott. So I think you're there. I'm not sure what's going on. Only again, important to not expect things or unreasonable things from your spouse because they're your spouse. And when we sat down, my spouse and I sat down and talked about this, like, why are you so upset at this? Or why am I so upset about this? And we talked it out because the same issue, if somebody else would have brought it up to me, I would not have been upset. I would have just dealt with it and come up with a solution and we would have solved that. Whereas it was, again, with you should have just taken care of it. Like, why? What's going on? Right. And when we talked through it and figured out, like, why are we doing this? It was really because, again, of the expectations that we had of each other. And you got to realize, even if you're in a relationship with somebody, unless you have some awesome superpower, you're still not mind readers. Like, she can't read my mind. Right. I can't read her mind. And what I prefer, like you said, that conversation in my head of what she should have done really isn't that conversation in her head. She had a different conversation, or she had a different modus operandus, right? And when we sat down, discussed it, and then had regular meetings to communicate what each of us should be doing versus expecting each other to be doing certain things, then our relationship grew much better, and we were able to, help our business grow as well as the relationship that we had with each other. So that communication was key.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, oftentimes in our family, we have totally different expectations to people outside of our family. And that can cause a lot of problems because we just assume that they know us, they understand us, and they don't.
Right. And so one of the key things that we're actually working with a group is a couple right now, Scott. And what they found is that when they have daily meetings to discuss what they do during the day for their business does really well. And they were doing well for a couple months, and then all of a sudden they stopped doing that for about a month. And they reported back that their performance dropped because they weren't having their daily meetings. And so our advice obviously was go back to your daily meetings. So it's right. Amazing how a 30-minute daily conversation about what you should be doing throughout the day can affect your business, how impactful that can be. And you take that for granted. You think, oh, it's only 30 minutes, so we don't really, I'm busy. Let's not do it today. Let's do it, tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, oh, I got something to do. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it. And then next thing you know, you don't do it, and nothing gets done because you guys didn't talk about it. And then you get upset at each other for not doing what you're supposed to do, right? So 30-minute daily meetings are so powerful when you're working with somebody in a business kind of context. And I would even say outside of business, communication with your significant other or an individual is so key. You might be attracted to somebody just from a physical aspect or for some other reason, only that physical attraction will only last so long if you don't connect on a communication level. You got to communicate with each other, and make sure that you set expectations for each other or for yourself so that each other understands what those expectations are.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And so is there anything else we need to tell people when it comes to relationship in business?
So again, relationship in business, the communication factor is in my opinion, one of the most critical things. A second thing that, well, awareness, communication, right? And so the third thing that I would say in business, and again, everything that we talk about in business, Scott, most likely it applies in personal relationships. Well, it's just people don't think that way, right? They separate
Right.
business and personal. And in reality, what works for business many times also works for a personal relationship, right? And so the third thing that I would say is a consistent review process, right? So, when I was in the corporate world, we did quarterly reviews. Every 3 months, we would sit down, go through goals, review our goals, review what we're discussing, review what kind of progress we're making, and we would get a feedback. And we've talked about it here too, Scott, is sometimes annually. So you do quarterly, and then you could do annual goals as well. And annually,
Right.
you would do what we call a 360 feedback, right? Which is you get feedback from everybody around you to see how you're doing, which is your coworkers, your friends, your family, your volunteer service organization. So anybody that you can in different groups, you get feedback from them about who you are and how you've been performing as a friend, as a coworker, as whatever. So that kind of feedback is important, as well as those quarterly reviews on status to see if you need to make adjustments along the way. Right. So,
Right.
and then the fourth thing, obviously, is to actually make those adjustments. Right. So,
Right.
if somebody gives you feedback and you don't like their feedback and you don't make a change, that doesn't do you any good. Right. So
That's right. That's right.
So you have to make.
You got to take the
right?
action
Don't
or
ask.
communicate that the feedback wasn't any good.
Right. Yeah. So if you're going to ask for feedback,
you don't have to agree with the feedback, right?
true.
I mean, someone could say something, and it's like, well, you hurt my feelings, and I don't agree with you. And on the other hand, if 10 of your employees are giving you the same feedback, then the chances are they're more correct than you are.
It's amazing though how many times 10 employees will give feedback to a boss and the boss doesn't care. Right, because they're the boss, right? So it happens a lot, and unfortunately, that also causes for a poor work
Highway or the highway.
Yeah, some bosses it is their way or the highway, and it doesn't really matter what you think. Great, appreciate your feedback. Now get back to work, right? Like I said, that doesn't build a long-term relationship. That doesn't help the work environment whatsoever. So. Whatever feedback you're getting, at least ask the question of why am I getting this feedback, and is there something I should be doing because of that feedback, right? And the answer could, like you said, Scott, could be yes, could be no. Only at least you asked the question, you thought about it, right?
Right. Yeah, and one thing, an easy way to ask that question would be, well, what could we do differently? Or how can I, if the problem is the boss could say, well, like, how can I handle this situation differently? And sometimes it's personalities, right? People, they're rough and they're gruff, or they're soft and they're, wishy-washy, and then you just sort of need to know. But oftentimes the people doing the work know the best way to do the work. And then we put a system in for doing the work that fights against the best way of doing it. And that causes frustrations. And going back to my grocery days again, I can remember a number of times where, as a store manager, my boss came into the store and he ended up talking to like the bulk food clerk or something. And, how are you doing? What's going on? Like, he's just being nice. And then after a minute, they say, why do we do this? Like, why don't we do that? And he goes, oh, that's a really good idea. I don't know. Like, we should do it that way. It makes total sense. And because oftentimes we're so close to the task or the job or whatever, we don't see the obvious. And I can recall a number of times where they made these small changes, but it just made life so much easier for the clerk, more efficient, more faster, more all that sort of stuff. And so sometimes just asking people, like, how's it going and what are you doing, and is there anything we could do to make your job easier? And they're doing the job all the time. They're constantly thinking about, I got this frustrating thing. What if I could do this, or what if I could do that? And sometimes you can make a simple change.
So I guess that's another key factor, Scott, to think about, which is when there are challenges, when there are issues that you recognize in the relationship, I oftentimes do my best to nip it in the bud, which means don't let it fester, don't let it build up. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a non-issue, right? And you don't know until you bring that up in a conversation. You don't know until you ask, and asking can be scary sometimes. Bringing up certain things can be painful
Yeah.
sometimes. And again, the more you let it fester and build up, like your sister for 50 years, the worse it can be. Fortunately, in that situation, it wasn't so bad. And I've met individuals, I've met people in relationships that something builds up for 5 years, and had they discussed it, they would be fine, and instead they
Yes.
end up getting a divorce or breaking up, and letting
Or the
it
business
grow.
goes out. Business.
Yeah, or the business goes out of business because it wasn't discussed, it wasn't handled or dealt with. And so, the sooner you recognize something, then don't let it fester too long. Don't let it sit around. Bring it up again. Communication is the key there. So recognizing what's going on and then being brave enough to talk about it. And I do say being brave enough because, like I said, sometimes it can be painful and scary. So, um,
Yeah, that's a really good point. It takes a lot of courage. I mean, it takes courage to be an entrepreneur, go out on your own, take those chances and those risks instead of bagging groceries for the rest of your life. And but I tell you, when you get on the other side, I mean, it's this fear, right? There's all sorts of different acronyms for it, but when you get on the other side, like, oh, what a relief! And oftentimes we procrastinate, and just becomes a bigger and bigger problem.
absolutely.
Cool. So, Chaffee, I think we've come close to the end of our time together. Any final words of wisdom when it comes to relationship? We're going to call you Dr. Chaff from now on.
Yeah. So, we've mentioned it before. I'll say it again, is that your net worth is your network, or your network is your net worth. The bigger your network is, the more opportunities that are presented to you. And that all boils down to building good relationships. And building good relationships is all about having a servant's heart and communicating your needs and wants, and seeing how you help other people through communicating, getting them to communicate those needs and wants to you. And so, this whole lesson today was all about building relationships and how do you deal with negative relationships. And the answer to that is, again, awareness and communication, and dealing with those as they come. To that, there comes a point in time where sometimes you just need to break away and relationships and look for new relationships. And sometimes you can fix relationships, sometimes that it's better not to fix them and just wish somebody the best and move on. And that really comes again through the
Right.
communication process to determine what the future holds with you. I will say one other thing too, Scott, is that the foundation of a good relationship, other than communication, is trust. If you cannot trust another individual, then having a good relationship is going to be extremely difficult. And so,
Yeah.
I trust you wholeheartedly with the things that we work on, and because I'll just ask you to do something and trust that you'll get it done. If not, I'll yell at you. Only I'll trust that you get it done. and it's
Every
been a
day
great
for
relationship.
30 minutes, you yell at me. I know that's how our relationship works.
That's right. and I trust that it will get done. I trust that you have my best interest because I have your best interest, and so that's critical in a relationship as well. So I know I added another factor as we're
Sure
closing
is.
up to that. Only I thought it was important. I'm
Good
done.
stuff. All right. So this is the point where we have this beautiful little montage of how to get a hold of Chaffee if you want to know more about the things that he does and are looking for a coach to help you take your business to the next level. And what is your website again? It's only on that video for a short period.
It is www.keyconcept.com, Key Concept Coaching. The idea is obviously that you can apply key concepts to your business to expand and grow and blow it out of the water.
Awesome. Thanks, Chaffee, for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you like us, share, subscribe, hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Usually Fridays, I was going to say Friday mornings, but it kind of depends where in the world you are or where I am, whether it's actually in the morning or not. We do these. If you've got any questions, make sure you put them in the comments, and we'll bring them up next time or during the, I should say this at the beginning. If you got any questions or comments, put them in the comment section and we'll deal with them during the show. So thank you, Chaffee. Thanks for joining us. Our executive producer, Sharub, thank you. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.